A warm welcome to today's video in which I will be explaining the unit of propositional knowledge for philosophy A-level. Now the unit begins with Plato, and Plato defines propositional knowledge as a justified true belief. So I have knowledge if I have a belief which is true and I have sufficient justification for my belief. We can explain that position using this framework. S knows P if 1. S believes that P. 2. P is true. 3. S is justified in believing P. The extra notes for this theory that you might need to know if writing a 5-mark question, for example, about this, is as follows. These conditions are necessary, which means all 3 must be present. The conditions are sufficient conditions, and so together, if all 3 are present, it's enough to establish knowledge. And then finally, it establishes propositional knowledge, not ability knowledge or acquaintance knowledge. This is the accepted position for thousands of years in philosophy. And then finally, in 1963, I believe, in the 60s, Edmund Gettier comes along. There are various stories about how this happens, various myths, I would imagine, and Gettier provides the Gettier cases. Now, the Gettier cases all work in a similar way. They add an element of epistemic luck to show that the 3 conditions are not sufficient in establishing knowledge. The most common and one of the most simple cases is the Smith and Jones job interview. Smith believes that Jones will get the job. He sees Jones handle 10 coins, and so he proposes that the man with 10 coins will get the job. Smith is actually the one who gets the job, but as it turned out, Smith also has 10 coins in his pocket, and so his propositional knowledge claim that the man with 10 coins would get the job is correct. But this doesn't seem satisfactory. The next example, Brown in Barcelona. Smith, from his experience, proposes that Jones owns a Ford. He uses a disjunctive premise to claim that either Brown is in Barcelona or Jones owns a Ford. A disjunctive premise is just an either-or statement. So either Brown is in Barcelona or Jones owns a Ford. Now, the propositional knowledge claim there is correct, but it turns out Jones doesn't own a Ford, and the reason why the claim is correct is because Brown was, just by chance, in Barcelona. Again, this doesn't seem like Smith knows the disjunctive claim here. And so we have a justified true belief, but we don't have knowledge. There are also Gettier style examples. So the first 2 I've just explained are from Gettier himself, but there are other examples which other contemporary philosophers have proposed. There's a clock tower example where in a town centre you walk past the clock, the sun is in the middle of the sky, it says it's 12 o'clock, so you assume it's midday. Now, the clock is broken, but by chance it is actually 12 o'clock and the clock was right. Doesn't seem like an appropriate claim to call knowledge. Did you really know it was 12 o'clock? There's also a fake barn example where Barney is driving in Barn County. He sees hundreds of fake barns, assuming that they're real, and then he sees a barn, he points to it and he says, that's a real barn, and he's correct. Just by chance, the one he pointed at was the only real barn in Barn County. But again, this doesn't really seem like the type of claim we should be calling knowledge, despite the fact it's a justified true belief. There are a host of counters or additions we can make, changes we can make to try and avoid the Gettier style cases. The first one is a Cartesian position, and that's Infallibilism. We can make this distinction using Hume's fork. So we have the a priori relations of ideas, and then we have the a posteriori matters of fact. And the matters of fact here, they're not certain. They're about the world, they're all contingent, and so we don't know them. What we can be certain of is the infallible claims. These are analytic, these are a priori, these are tautologically true, and so we can believe them without any rational doubt. Truths of this kind are demonstrative, and as Hume says, they're loosely defined as deductive. And so any sort of claim from our experience, and that includes all of the Gettier cases, none of them are knowledge. And they don't begin as knowledge, they're just not knowledge, because there is room for rational doubt, they're not tautologically true. Now, the counter to this theory, it does deal with the Gettier case as well, but the counter is it's just an inaccurate and unintuitive account of knowledge. It's such a radical position that it's really impossible to maintain outside of the philosophy classroom. And so it should be rejected, because it's just not what we mean by knowledge. It's a different thing. It's a type of knowledge, but it's not all of our knowledge. The next way to rectify the position of JTB is by adding a condition, and by adding the no false lemmas condition. So this aims to rectify the issue by adding a condition. A lemma is an assertion taken for granted, which leads to the knowledge proposition. So a false lemma is a premise which is false, by tightening the necessary and sufficient conditions. Now that's actually a response that I wrote in the actual A-level exams in 2023. That response was part of a response that helped me get 12 out of 12. So stick around, subscribe, like the video. I will share the tips that help me get marks like that. Now, no false lemma seems quite good, because in most of these examples, there seems to be a false lemma here. Jones will get the job. Jones owns a Ford. The clock tower is working. That's a sort of a tacit assumption. The problem is an example like the fake barn example. And so false lemmas does work against some Gettier cases, but it doesn't work for the fake barn example, because there doesn't really seem to be a false lemma. Barney sees a barn, and it is a barn. And that's the barn example. And so there isn't a false lemma that we can extend this to try and beat. Because although you could say he has a false lemma that all the other barns are real, that doesn't lead to his claim that the barn that he sees is real. And so there's no false lemma. And so no false lemmas does work with some efficiency. It is somewhat effective, but it isn't totally effective. That sort of nuance in your evaluation is going to help you get the top marks in your essays. We have two more. We have reliabilism and we have virtue epistemology. Now, reliabilism changes the justification. It changes that condition to be R. So instead of J, it's R. Instead of justification, it's reliabilism. And so R is a reliable cognitive process. We need to choose a process that will often yield truth claims. And so just taking someone's word for it, for example, in Smith and Jones' job interview, isn't often going to yield the truth. Just hearing gossip, for example, we can assume that's what Smith has heard. He's just heard some gossip. And is gossip likely to yield a high percentage of truth claims? Well, probably not. So it's not a reliable process. Now, reliabilism can work quite effectively against lots of the Gettier cases, but here's the key criticism. There is no clear guidance on how specific or broad a reliable method should be. Now, I know that the textbook uses the example of seeing your friend across the street. So, seeing someone from across the street that you've seen a lot and that you recognise is reasonably reliable. Now, let's suppose that it's foggy and it's less reliable. But let's say that your friend always wears a yellow coat And despite the fact it's foggy, it's such a distinct coat that it is a reliable process. What if you're further away? Well, then it's less reliable. The problem here is that reliabilism is very difficult to apply, and even difficult to apply to a hypothetical case, let alone to our everyday life, because the bounds for what counts as a reliable process isn't very specific. And so we can be a bit ad hoc with how we apply this. Okay, gossip might not be reliable, but what about gossip from the wife of the owner of the corporation who hears all of the secrets of the goings on about who will get jobs and who won't? Then suddenly that becomes more reliable. But what if the wife is prone to lie, and she often will make up gossip and spread gossip for some sadistic reason? You see how this is really a very hard theory to apply. And the final theory we have is virtue epistemology. So this again replaces the condition of J, and it replaces it for V, a virtuous method. Now, a virtuous method uses a 3A system. To pass a claim, a propositional knowledge claim must be accurate, must be correct, it must be adroit, it must use skill, and it must be apt. It must be correct because of the skill. So, the apt claim is the most important one here. In the Smith & Jones job interview, it deals with the issue well. So, the claim, Smith's claim, that the man with 10 coins will get the job is accurate. And is skillful because he used some deduction, or maybe induction. He heard some gossip. He saw Jones being really confident. He counted the coins in Jones' hand, and he formed this belief. So it is an adroit claim, but it's not apt because he isn't right because of the skill and the skilled process that he used. He was right just by luck. And that's the same for the clock tower example, and that's the same for Brown in Barcelona. Again, though, the problem is the fake barn example. Because it was so simple of Barney sees a barn, it is a barn, he was right. He was right because of skill, because of his sight. And so we have all three conditions satisfied. And yet we can't call it knowledge. Now, Sosa, who is the philosopher who proposes virtue epistemology, makes a distinction between animal and reflective knowledge to show that passively observing things while driving is more like animal knowledge, and actually we can only trust reflective knowledge. For me, I find that ad hoc, but you're free to evaluate that as you wish. Thank you for watching. I hope this video has been helpful in helping you understand propositional knowledge. Thank you for watching.